There's a chill that hangs in the air when you pass through Villisca, Iowa, a silence that weighs heavy, as though the town itself is holding its breath, never daring to speak of the darkness that once filled its streets. It was on a warm summer night in 1912 that the terror began, when a tragedy, the kind no one could have imagined, unfolded in the quiet of the Moore family home. It was a peaceful evening, the kind where the world felt wrapped in comfort. The wind gently rustled the leaves outside, and the scent of summer lingered in the air. The Moore family, Josiah, his wife Sarah, their 4 children and 2 young guests, had just returned from a church service. They were a picture of happiness, the kind of family that everyone in town knew and loved. There was laughter as they entered their home, the warmth of a safe, familiar space wrapping them like a soft blanket. But inside that home, something was already stirring, something that would soon change everything. The calm before the storm. As night settled in, the town of Villisca slept. People tucked themselves in, the peace of the evening providing comfort. But not everyone was sleeping. Up in the darkened attic of the Moore house, someone waited, watching, listening. Human physiology is a strange thing. The body can feel a presence before the mind fully registers it. A small twitch of a muscle, a quickening of the heartbeat, the sudden rush of adrenaline that comes before the panic. Josiah and Sarah Moore might have felt it, but they wouldn't have had time to react. Their bodies were already beginning to settle into the rhythmic patterns of sleep. Slow heartbeats, relaxed muscles, shallow breaths. It's in these moments, when our guard is down and our senses dulled by exhaustion, that we are most vulnerable. Upstairs, as the Moore children slept soundly, unaware of the impending danger, their bodies were doing what every child's body does after a long, tiring day. They were recharging, their growing limbs and developing brains getting a much-needed rest. The intruder, the stranger who waited in the attic, knew all this. He had been watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The dark figure moved quietly, his footsteps light on the creaky wooden floors. The weight of his actions hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. The intruder slowly descended the stairs with practiced ease, his heart steady. Adrenaline surged through his veins. The pulse of human life quickened in his chest, making his body react with calculated efficiency. His muscles, sharpened by anticipation, moved swiftly and silently through the house. Josiah was the first to sense something was wrong. Perhaps it was a noise or the slight shift of the atmosphere that caused his body to stir. His senses heightened just before an eerie stillness enveloped him. That instinctual feeling, that shift in the air, was enough to warn him. Yet, by the time he fully realized it, it was already too late. His mind and body couldn't prepare for what followed. Sarah, his wife, felt the shift in the air too. There was a tension, a subtle change that made her stir slightly from her peaceful slumber. But like Josiah, she was caught in the vulnerable space between sleep and wakefulness, where everything seemed normal and safe. But the air in the room felt different now, more oppressive. The children, sleeping soundly upstairs, didn't stand a chance. Their bodies, wrapped in a peaceful slumber, were completely unaware of the danger that lurked below. The youngest of them stirred briefly, perhaps a fleeting sense of unease, a small muscle tightening, but it wasn't enough to bring her fully awake. Before fear could flood her system, everything went dark. The aftermath. When morning light finally crept through the curtains of the Moore household, it wasn't the usual warmth of a new day that filled the rooms. It was a chilling silence, a heavy, oppressive silence that hung thick in the air. Neighbors who had gathered outside the home saw something that stopped them cold. The front door was locked, but the windows were covered with curtains. A strange heaviness lay in the atmosphere, an unexplainable weight that urged them to do the unthinkable. They had to break in. They had to see what had happened. When they finally opened the door, they were met with a scene that haunted them to their core. The house was still, too still. The family was gone. Josiah, Sarah, their children, and the two young guests who had been staying the night. Their absence left a void, an overwhelming sense of loss that seemed to fill every corner of the home. The house was eerily quiet, yet there was something unsettling in that silence. It was the kind of silence that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Something was very wrong here, and it wasn't just the empty rooms. It was the feeling that the presence of the family still lingered, as if they had never truly left. There was a feeling as though the killer had been part of the house, moving among them unnoticed, vanishing without a trace.